The Crossroads Diner clung to the side of Highway 17 like a stubborn burr on a dog's tail. It was an island of fluorescent light and grease smoke in the vast inky sea of rural Ohio nights. And I, Jamie, 17 going on 18, was one of its weary inhabitants. My uniform was a stiff, perpetually wrinkled polyester dress, striped blue and white, and my only true companion was the faint smell of stale coffee ingrained in my skin. I worked the late shift, a purgatory that began just as the last of the family regulars were gathering their sticky-fingered kids and ended as the early morning shift change was wiping sleep from their eyes. The hours between were a kaleidoscope of humanity's less than charming aspects. Drunks, loud and entitled, slurring their orders. Truckers, some gruff but decent, others with eyes that lingered too long, hands that wanted to linger longer. And then the random anonymous souls, passing through on their way to somewhere else, somewhere I often dreamed of. My regular pay was $2.15 an hour. $2.15 for every minute I spent trying to smile through the fog of exhaustion and the pungent cloud of greasy diner air. Tips were my lifeblood, my escape fund. They ranged from a pathetic $1 bill, folded with deliberate contempt, to a rare, exhilarating 10. Anything more felt like finding buried treasure. The soundtrack to my nights was the relentless hum of the fridge, the clatter of plates, and the same damn joke, over and over. "You ready to order?" I'd ask, pen poised, voice trained to a cheerful lilt that felt like a betrayal of my soul. "What'll you have?" And like clockwork, it would come. "You, darling." I'd perfected the fake laugh, a short, breathy puff of air that conveyed amusement without actual mirth. "I'm not on the menu." Most of the time, that was the end of it. A lazy chuckle, then they'd finally order their stacked pancakes or their Salisbury steak. But some nights, the crude humor escalated. There was this one guy, big, beefy, with a permanent sneer carved into his face. He was with a couple of his buddies, all sporting that same glint in their eyes, like a pack of wolves eyeing a stray lamb. He'd ordered a coffee, and when I asked him if he was ready to eat, he leaned back, a menacing glint in his gaze. "You ready to order?" What'll you have?" I recited, automatic. He grinned, a flash of uneven teeth. "You, darling." I started my practiced laugh, but he cut me off. He leaned forward, snatched the menu from my hand, and slammed it face down on the grimy linoleum floor. The laminated paper skittered. "Step on that," he slurred, pointing to the menu with a thick finger. "Then you will be." His buddies erupted, a cacophony of guffaws that echoed off the greasy walls. It wasn't a friendly laugh, it was a hungry, predatory sound, like something out of the hills have eyes. My fake laugh died in my throat. My face flushed hot, but I forced myself to keep it neutral. My hands suddenly felt clammy. This wasn't just a crude joke, it was an invitation, a challenge. It was designed to make me feel small, to humiliate me. I gripped my order pad, knuckles white. The words caught in my throat. My mind raced, searching for a comeback, a retort that would shut them down without costing me my job. But nothing came. My tongue felt thick, useless. I just stood there, a cheap polyester uniform, a cheap smile, and the burning shame of a menu at my feet. Eventually, one of his buddies, perhaps sensing the line had been crossed, nudged him. He grunted, pulled the menu up with his foot, and tossed it onto the table. Just coffee and a Reuben, sweet cheeks. I nodded, scribbled it down, and fled to the kitchen, my heart thudding against my ribs. In the relative safety of the pass-through, I leaned against the counter, taking shallow breaths. I wanted to cry, to scream, to throw a plate at his head. Instead, I just took a moment, then straightened my uniform and walked back out. That was the job. That was the grind. Most nights blurred into one long, weary stream of coffee refills, forgotten orders, and the clatter of cutlery. But there was one night, a particularly cold and dismal Tuesday, that stood out. The diner was slow, just a couple of truckers catching some sleep in their rigs outside, and a lone figure in booth 7, Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson wasn't a trucker. He was one of those early morning regulars, arriving precisely at 2 a.m., long before the sun even considered rising. He was a quiet man, probably in his late 60s, with kind, tired eyes and a neat salt and pepper beard. He always ordered the same thing: black coffee, no sugar, and a single slice of plain toast. He read the newspaper he brought himself, folded neatly on the table beside his cup. He never made small talk beyond a polite nod and a soft, "Thank you, Jamie." He was a stark contrast to the usual late-night crowd, a beacon of quiet dignity in the chaos. That night, things had been worse than usual. A group of rowdy college kids, back from a road trip, had trashed their booth and left precisely 75 cents on a $40 bill. Then a trucker, clearly drunk, had pinched my backside when I leaned over to pick up a dropped napkin. I'd snapped, something in me finally breaking. I'd spun around, my voice a furious whisper, "Don't you ever touch me again!" He'd laughed, but his eyes had narrowed. I could have been fired for that. My manager, Brenda, would have killed me, but something in me just didn't care anymore. I walked away, heart pounding, blood still boiling. I caught Mr. Henderson's gaze across the diner. He didn't react, just slowly folded his newspaper, his eyes briefly meeting mine. There was no judgment, no pity, just a quiet acknowledgement. I finished cleaning the kids' booth, trying to scrub away the stickiness and the resentment. My feet ached, my head throbbed, and the thought of another "you darling" joke felt like a physical assault. My tips from the last 3 hours amounted to 3 crumpled dollars and a handful of change. It was crushing. This was supposed to be my escape fund. What was I saving for? A down payment on a beaten-up Ford Pinto I'd seen for sale. A rusty, dented symbol of freedom that felt perpetually out of reach. I walked over to Mr. Henderson's booth for his refill. "More coffee, Mr. Henderson?" He looked up, a faint smile touching his lips. "Just the check, Jamie." "But thank you." I nodded, pulled out my pad, and tallied his bill. $1.85. As I placed it on the table, he reached into his wallet. He pulled out a crisp $10 bill. My heart gave a little flutter. A 10 spot was rare. Then, he pulled out another. He folded them neatly and placed them on the check. $20. My eyes widened. "Mr. Henderson, your bill is only $1.85. He looked at me, his kind eyes steady. "I know, Jamie." He pushed the money gently towards me. "For your Pinto?" My breath hitched. I had mentioned the Pinto once, weeks ago, a passing comment about wanting to save for a car. I hadn't thought he'd even heard me. And $20. It was a fortune compared to my usual haul. "But I can't." My voice trailed off. It felt like charity, and despite the exhaustion, the shame of the last few hours, I had my pride. He simply smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "You work hard, Jamie, and you endure more than you should. Consider it a down payment on your future." He paused, then added, his voice soft, "Some things on the menu are worth more than the price listed." He stood up, collected his newspaper, and walked towards the door. He didn't wait for my thanks, just gave a small nod goodbye. I watched him go, feeling a strange mix of emotions: embarrassment, gratitude, and a sudden, overwhelming wave of hope. I picked up the $20 bills. They felt heavier than any money I'd ever held. Not just because of the value, but because of the unexpected kindness, the quiet recognition of my struggle. It wasn't just about the money, it was about being seen. The sun was just beginning to paint the horizon in streaks of orange and pink, casting a pale, hesitant light into the diner. The late shift was ending. The steady hum of the fridge, the smell of grease, it was all still there. But the shame from the earlier incidents felt a little lighter. The thought of the Pinto sitting out there somewhere, waiting for me, felt a little closer. I looked at the empty booth 7, then out at the gray dawn. I was still Jamie, still navigating the endless parade of crude jokes and weary smiles. But for the first time in a long time, the Crossroads Diner didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a crossroads, and I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that I was on my way out. $1, $2, $20 at a time. Every day, I thought about him. Mario, the man in the suit. The one who talked about circuses and fancy cars, making me feel like I was talking to someone from a different planet, or at least a different tax bracket. He'd spun tales, I'd listened, I'd refilled his coffee 3 times, I'd even laughed at his understated jokes, a rare, genuine laugh, because he wasn't trying to hit on me or make a crude remark. He was different, and then he left, leaving nothing but a wet ring on the counter where his coffee cup had sat. Not $1, not a quarter, not even a single lonely cent. It cut deeper than the usual stiff. With the truckers and the drunks and the hills have eyes wannabes, you expected nothing. Or you expected $1, maybe 2 if they were feeling generous after a particularly big meal. But Mario... He'd given off this air of refinement, of knowing how the world worked, of having means. And yet, he stiffed me harder than anyone. It wasn't just the money, it was the principle. It felt like a slap in the face, a dismissal of my time, my effort, my very presence. The resentment festered, a low, simmering flame beneath the surface of my daily grind. Each greasy plate I cleared, each sticky counter I wiped down, each forced smile I offered to another leering trucker. It all felt heavier because of Mario. His image, sharp in his suit, contrasted so starkly with the grimy reality of my workplace. And his lack of a tip somehow made the grimy reality even grimmer. It was a constant reminder that no matter how polite or interesting a customer seemed, they could still be just as cheap, or even cheaper, than the coarsest of the clientele. Another coffee. Jamie girl? Mr. Henderson's voice broke through my thoughts. He was one of the regulars, a retired construction worker with a perpetually stained baseball cap and a fondness for black coffee and the morning newspaper. He came in every single day, ordered the same thing, and always left me a single $1, no matter how long he sat or how many refills he got. $1. Always $1. It wasn't much, especially spread over an hour or 2, but it was consistent. It was reliable. And in a strange way, it was comforting. Mr. Henderson, for all his predictability, never surprised you in a bad way. He wasn't going to talk about transporting tigers for a circus and then walk out without a trace of gratitude. I poured Mr. Henderson his coffee, the familiar aroma doing little to lift my spirits. Coming right up, Mr. H. I wondered if Mario had ever worked a job like this, where every extra $1 determined whether you could afford gas for the week, or a new pair of shoes, or if you could put anything aside for a future that felt 1,000,000 miles away. Probably not. He probably woke up in a nice bed, in a nice house, and never had to worry about a $2.15 an hour base pay with tips as your lifeline. The truck stop was my prison, and Mario had just rubbed salt in the wound of its bars. I'd started to look at every new customer, especially those who looked even slightly well off, with suspicion. My natural inclination to be friendly, to engage, withered. What was the point? They'd just take what they wanted and leave without a second thought. It made me harder, more cynical. The bright-eyed eagerness I'd started with, that naive hope for a good turnout, was slowly being chipped away, replaced by a weary resignation. I just wanted to get through my shift, collect my paltry wages, and forget about the endless parade of strangers. But Mario, he was different. He haunted my thoughts. I pictured him driving his expensive cars, talking to important people, completely oblivious to the ripple effect of his casual stinginess. Every morning as the sun began to peek over the horizon, casting long shadows across the empty booths, I'd clean his table. And every morning I'd imagine him walking back in, maybe with an apology, maybe with a forgotten $20 bill. But he never did. Not yet, anyway. The wait for his return, fueled by a strange mix of hope and renewed anger, became another unspoken burden of my waitressing life. The days bled into each other, each one a carbon copy of the last. The clatter of plates, the hiss of the coffee machine, the endless parade of faces, all blurred into a monotonous hum. Yet, through it all, Mario remained a sharp, distinct image in my mind. He was the ghost in my machine, the lingering sting that made every demanding customer, every meager tip, feel like a fresh insult. My cynicism hardened like old grease on a griddle. I stopped listening as intently, stopped smiling as genuinely. What was the point? Most people saw you as a vending machine for food and drink, not a person. And the ones who seemed to see you, like Mario, were often the worst offenders. 2 weeks. It felt like 2 years. 2 weeks of waking up before dawn, of wiping down sticky counters and inhaling the scent of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. 2 weeks of Mr. Henderson's predictable dollar and the fleeting kindness of a few regulars, all overshadowed by the memory of Mario's elegant departure and empty-handed gesture. The truck stop wasn't just my prison. It was a constant reminder of how easily people could disappoint you, how quickly they could dismiss your worth. One Tuesday morning, the sun barely hinting at its rise, I saw him. He walked through the automatic doors, still in a suit, still with that quiet confidence that seemed so out of place in this greasy spoon. Mario. My breath hitched, a strange mix of dread and a perverse satisfaction washing over me. Dread because I knew he'd probably do it again, and satisfaction because I could finally confirm what a truly cheap charlatan he was. He headed straight for my section, a small polite smile on his face. My heart did a slow, resentful churn. I plastered on my best professional face, a mask I'd perfected over years of faking enthusiasm. "Morning," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the bubbly energy I'd offered him last time. "Coffee?" He nodded, still smiling. "Please, black." I poured the coffee, my movements stiff. "Anything for breakfast today?" "Just the coffee for now. Thank you, Jamie." He remembered my name. Of course, he did. He was that kind of guy, the kind who remembered your name but forgot your livelihood. I gritted my teeth and walked away, my back rigid. I went straight to the kitchen, pushing through the swinging door. "Guess who's back?" I muttered to Carlos, the cook, who was flipping bacon with practiced ease. "Who?" He grunted, not looking up. "Circus man. Mario. The one who talked about tigers and fancy cars and then stiffed me." Carlos let out a low whistle. "No kidding? He's got some nerve." "He sure does," I agreed, grabbing a clean rag and scrubbing furiously at a spot that wasn't there. Just sits there, smiling like a damn Cheshire cat, knowing he's not gonna leave me a penny. Maria, the dishwasher, looked up from the sink, her face a mask of sympathy. It felt good to vent, to have my resentment validated. It fueled my annoyance when I went back out to the floor. Mario sat there, calmly sipping his coffee, that infuriating gentle smile still playing on his lips. Every time I passed his booth to check on other tables, he'd meet my gaze with a slight nod, a silent acknowledgement that I interpreted as smug mockery. Oh, he knows, I thought. He knows he's going to walk out on me again, and he finds it amusing. My energy was non-existent. I refilled his coffee once, silently, without asking. I didn't engage, didn't offer a single pleasantry beyond the absolute minimum. When he finished his coffee, he signaled for the check. My heart sank. Here it was, the moment of truth. My hand trembled slightly as I wrote out the bill for his single cup of coffee. I walked it over, placing it face down on the table. "Whenever you're ready," I mumbled, already turning to walk away, preparing myself for the inevitable empty departure. "Jamie," he called, his voice soft. I stopped, turning back reluctantly. He was holding the bill I'd just given him, but his hand wasn't reaching for his wallet. Instead, he was pulling out a crisp, folded bill from his jacket pocket. "I was here a week or 2 ago," he began, his eyes meeting mine, "and after I was on the road, I realized I hadn't left you a tip." He paused, and for the first time his smile faltered, replaced by a look of genuine contrition. "I felt so bad, truly. You were the best waitress I have had in a while. Attentive, engaging. I was distracted with a business call I had just finished and completely spaced on it. Here," he unfolded the bill and placed it in my hand. My eyes widened, gaping at the number staring back at me. A $50 bill. A single, crisp, green 50. For a single cup of coffee. My mouth fell open, a silent gasp escaping. I stood there, rooted to the spot, the bill feeling impossibly heavy in my palm. Mario reached out, patting my shoulder gently, his expression warm but not lingering. "Have a good day, Jamie." And with that, he stood, adjusted his suit jacket, and walked out, leaving me frozen in the aisle, the $50 bill a shocking, unbelievable reality in my hand. The clatter of the diner faded into a distant hum. The resentment, the bitterness, the hardened cynicism, it all evaporated in an instant, replaced by a gaping void of shock and a sudden, burning shame. My cheeks flushed. I had written him off, cursed his name, imagined him as a smug, heartless cheapskate. I had talked trash about him in the back, convinced myself he was deliberately mocking me with his smiles. And all this time he had been carrying the memory of his oversight, feeling bad, and planning to make it right. I clutched the 50, my fingers tracing the smooth paper. It wasn't just the money. It was the utter, humbling reversal of my own judgment. Mario wasn't a lesson in cynicism, he was a lesson in humility. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the truck stop didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a stage, where I had just been handed a script I never saw coming. The clatter of the diner faded into a distant hum. The resentment, the bitterness, the hardened cynicism, it all evaporated in an instant, replaced by a gaping void of shock and a sudden burning shame. My cheeks flushed. I had written him off, cursed his name, imagined him as a smug, heartless cheapskate. I had talked trash about him in the back, convinced myself he was deliberately mocking me with his smiles. And all this time he had been carrying the memory of his oversight, feeling bad, and planning to make it right. I clutched the 50, my fingers tracing the smooth paper. It wasn't just the money, it was the utter, humbling reversal of my own judgment. Mario wasn't a lesson in cynicism, he was a lesson in humility. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the truck stop didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a stage, where I had just been handed a script I never saw coming. I must have stood there for a full minute, stock still. The weight of the moment pressing down on me more than the money itself. Finally, I spun around and practically ran back to the kitchen, clutching the bill like a winning lottery ticket, a burning secret, and a mark of shame all at once. He came back, I stammered, holding out the $50 bill to Carlos, who paused mid-flip. Maria, still at the sink, turned, her hands dripping. Carlos's eyes widened. Then he let out a low whistle. "No kidding. The circus man? $50, I whispered, my voice thick with something I couldn't articulate. Relief, shame, disbelief. "For a cup of coffee." "He said he forgot last time." Maria crossed herself, a look of genuine awe on her face. "Dios mío. A good man, a good man." The words echoed in my head, mocking my earlier venom. I had called him a cheap charlatan, a smug Cheshire cat. I had allowed myself to stew in bitterness, to let one perceived slight poison my entire outlook, tainting every interaction. That $50 bill didn't just buy my coffee, it bought a mirror, reflecting back to me an ugly image of my own prejudice. The rest of that shift was different. The clatter of plates still sounded. The coffee machine still hissed, but the monotonous hum was broken by an inner shift. Mr. Henderson came in, ordered his usual. I poured his coffee, but this time I really looked at him, really listened when he grumbled about the weather. I hadn't changed my actions much, but my intent had. I saw him, truly saw him, not just as a dollar tip dispenser. That $50 humbled me. It wasn't a fortune, but its symbolic weight was immeasurable. It forced me to confront my own quick, harsh judgments. People make mistakes. Mario made a mistake, an oversight, easily corrected. I had made a far greater one, judging and condemning him in my mind, allowing a fleeting moment of forgetfulness on his part to define his character in my eyes. I kept that particular $50 bill for a long time. It sat in my wallet, a constant reminder. When it eventually got spent, the lesson stayed. I eventually left waitressing, moved on to other things. But that morning at the truck stop, with Mario and his unexpected generosity, became one of those foundational memories. I'm 48 now, and I still think about judging him so harshly, and cursing him daily in my mind. The irony is, part of my karma, I think, has been waitresses treating me like crap based on my appearance, perhaps assuming things about me much like I did about Mario. In those moments, I feel that familiar sting of being dismissed. And still, I pull their manager to the side and let them know why they aren't getting a tip, while I have the tip money in my hand. I never leave less than $10, and if they are good, it's 20 or more. Most times this is at a diner, and the bill is always less than $40. I know I sound like a tool, detailing my tipping habits, but normally I am nice. It's a direct consequence of that hard-learned lesson. On the flip side, had the customer, Mario, known how mad I was, how I was festering with resentment over his perceived slight, he probably would have been justified leaving me nothing. But he didn't know. He just knew he'd messed up, and he came back to make it right. That $50 wasn't just money. It was a profound lesson in extending grace, in reserving judgment, and in the quiet dignity of making amends. It taught me that sometimes the only thing truly cheap is a closed mind. It's not a big deal in the grand scheme of life, but it's something I have always remembered. A single act of forgotten kindness that ultimately ended up teaching me everything.